Episode 47 from Kilauea Volcano. Ladies and gentlemen, it is happening. Good to see you all. I'm here. It's been a very busy day. It's been a great day. The days seem to only be getting better, which is great. I love it. So happy. We have a big event coming up Saturday, May 16th. If you don't know already, it's happening. If you're anywhere in the Southern California area or even Arizona, we have people that are coming into our event, Conscious Connections from Arizona. They're taking the drive. We're having people fly in from the East Coast. Not many, but spontaneity hits you. You're welcome to join us. There is information on my Instagram. It's on my website, earthevolution.com/store. And more. Just quick reminder. So, episode 47 has begun. Right now, lava fountains are about 500 feet, 600 feet. So think like 150, 200 meters. Not the tallest you've ever seen. They've been over 1,700 feet with these eruptive episodes going back to December of 2024. And that's correct. We've had 47 eruptions now from Kilauea going back to December of 2024. And, well, if you do some research into Hawaii, it is really fascinating because we have unprecedented information as it relates to the Hawaiian volcanic system, just the hotspot mantle plume that makes up Hawaii, and all the volcanic sills and dikes that extend out from that hotspot to Kilauea, Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea. There's other areas, the East Rift Zone, where there was a really devastating long eruption in 2018. There's a very rich history, tons of data that we have. And what I'm finding remarkable about it as I'm researching into it and more, just in general now, not just today, but we've been boots on the ground, lots of stuff, walking through the lava tunnels, is that it's such a clear progression in terms of events. So it's quite easy to read in many aspects, which I'm finding great, because the easier something is to read and interpret, then the better we have an ability to perhaps forecast big eruptions. Because again, going back to 2018, the Lahaina Estates, 700 homes destroyed. I met someone when I was there on the Big Island back August of 2025, whose home was right outside the fissure eruption that opened up. So her house was shaking, there's gas, and fumes and smoke and ash, and she was worried that literally at any point her home could just, a crevasse could open up underneath her home and magma could start fissuring out, because that's what happened in Lahaina Estates. Really quite incredible. So we are going to do a bit of a roundup. And I'm going to go through some of the history and what we know about Kilauea and just in general Hawaii for the first part of this report. And then it's going to take some time, but we should have the time. I may have things later tonight that I need to attend to. So at any point I may have to just bounce off, but we should have also time, because my friend Elliot, dearest Elliot in San Francisco, or Eliyahu, he just finished his book, and it's like his final draft. It's an autobiography. And so I downloaded these research papers last night. I was going to read them yesterday. I just read them today. And I was thinking to myself, and I was already doing some research, and I was thinking to myself, I could go to Hawaii and find some people who lived there back in 1975 and get their firsthand reports of the magnitude 7.2 earthquake that struck. USGS actually has it at a magnitude 7.7. So magnitude 7.7, huge event. That was 51 years ago. It's about 50 and a half years ago now. So the 50th anniversary was last November, 2025. It's like, there's still people on the island who very clearly remember that event. I should probably do that, but I'll be going back to Hawaii. That's a whole trip. And I kind of want those boots on the ground field reports now. when I did my Napa Valley seismic project, if you don't know, I did a extensive surveying of Napa Valley in California using passive seismic methods, 100+ surveys across all of Napa Valley, measuring the shear wave velocities of the subsurface going down 30 meters, 100 meters. We did some ultra deep surveys too, going down like 500 meters, I believe. So that was something that I did. I talked to a lot of people who experienced the magnitude 6 earthquake in 2014. So I really value these field stories. So anyways, I called up Elliot and my other friend a few days earlier. He's like, let me get the book to you. Just give me your address, send it off, boom, he did it. So the book came in, I'm just flipping through it. I stumble upon chapter 6, and guess where Elliot was living in 1975? He's living in Hilo. In fact, he was on the beach directly south of Kilauea exactly when the magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck. And he goes in depth on his experience with the earthquake and the tsunami in chapter 6. So I think it's really going to be fantastic to read chapter 6 for you guys. We can kind of cozy up and do story time. Let me pull up the beach he specifically was at. I have it right here on Google Maps, but I can pull it up with the name and everything. Jalape. So here it is. We can just give this a quick look. If you have Google Earth here. He was basically spending the night sleeping on the beach because it struck at 4:47 a.m. local time, November 29th. Jalape, he was down here when the first earthquake struck, then the big one struck, the land subsided down 12 feet, and the tsunami wave rushed back in. So we'll read chapter 6 because it's quite funny, but also a lot of spiritual lessons baked in there. This whole book is about, and I've only read chapter 6 because I just got it yesterday, but this whole book is about his spiritual journey, and he is an incredible person. So shout out to Eliyahu, a good friend from San Francisco. So, but let us start with our main report. I just kind of want to go over what's been happening, all right? So we've had 47 eruptive episodes now. This one is just getting started, and it's probably going to last anywhere from 8 to 10 hours. The last one lasted 9 hours. These past 2 eruptive episodes, actually past 3, have been smaller than some of the other ones in this sequence, again going back to December 2024. But there's this variation. So sometimes the lava fountains are really high, other times they're a little bit shorter. Right now they're about, again, 500-600 feet tall. Well, this eruptive activity is effectively the newest phase of Kilauea after we had a few eruptions back in, there was an eruption in 2019, 2020, a couple others, but then really there was a big event that occurred in 2018. Okay, this is the East Rift eruptions that occurred, again, Lahani Estates. And let me show you where that is. We can actually look at it directly here. You'll see Lahani Estates there and see how this is all, people had homes here, and then look at what just happened. You get this huge rift to open up. You see some of the structures. I'm not sure that's new or old. Of course, some people, they own this land now, and land was formed, new land grew. I don't know exactly where, probably the furthermost extent right here. This is probably all new. But this erupted in the middle of this whole area. So this started up in April 29th of 2018. That's when the earthquake started. But then you had a big earthquake that really got things going on May 4th, 2018, 12:33 p.m. local time, magnitude 6.9. Magnitude 6.9, let's look at that earthquake because we have it right here. And the epicenter is to the southeast of Kilauea. So you have Kilauea right there. This is where it's erupting right now with episode 47. Again, if you look at it, boom shakalaka right there. That's where it is. It is occurring here in the summit caldera. This is the summit of Kilauea. In 10,000 years or 100,000 years, this volcano actually may be a lot bigger, right? Kilauea may grow a lot bigger because right now you have the Pacific plate moving this way and the hot spot staying in position effectively right here. So you already have the big island already offset from the hot spot a little bit. If you go up here to like Kohala, this is where, in Hawi, this is where you have the oldest part of the island and also the oldest volcano. And if it erupts again, it's going to be pretty significant in the fact that it's probably not going to do so. But what they are finding is that these magma systems extend out quite a bit more than you may think. We'll talk about that more later. So 6.9 earthquake, May 4, 2018. This is a few days after seismicity started up. You notice that the epicenter is effectively in between Kilauea and the East Rift Zone there, which is part of this whole Kilauea network. And then what happened is you started to have Kilauea caldera collapse. So you have these extensive magma chambers that exist under these volcanoes. We had a huge crater collapse, caldera collapse. And I can show you that video. Let me pull it up here. I have the video because it's really quite remarkable. If you don't see the collapse, you kind of don't understand it. I can give you the stats, but you're going to want to see this for yourself. So let me just, here it is. And this should be good. Okay, so let me turn myself off and rewind it just really quick. USGS, this is their video that they put out. Here we see that collapse. Wow. Now that's a long time lapse. It went down below the water level. So this really went down. You see that the water is even coming up, but then a series of eruptions boiled it off later. So this sunk down 1,500 meters or 1.5 kilometers. The crater floor dropped by up to 500 meters. The crater floor dropped by 500 meters and enlarged the overall crater of Halema Uma'u by 1.5 kilometers. Then you had a sequence of eruptions that started to fill it in. And where we are right now is the most recent sequence of eruptive episodes, which is continuing to fill it in. Though you can see here this lava lake filled in quite rapidly with some of these big eruptions that occurred. So that's kind of where we are right now with this. But there was a huge collapse back in 2018, and that pushed down on these magma systems, these reservoir sills that exist. They're effectively horizontal, but not 100%, diagonal to some degree. And they pushed, that caldera collapse went down like this. The reason why we suspect is because the magma started to move over here and erupted in the East Rift Zone. So you had this rapid transport of magma causing there to be depressurization, boom, the caldera collapse, and then that would further pressurize the rest of the leave. It's kind of a equal relationship thing. It's not just the magma leaving the caldera collapsing, it's both happening simultaneously, making the whole thing happen. Seismicity was concentrated in the eastern part of the caldera versus the western part, which makes sense. And it was concentrated also in the top 2.5 kilometers. So just the first 2.5 kilometers going down below the surface, 44,000 events. And what happened was that large collapse events repressurized the system. So you had this large collapse, it got repressurized, and then overall magma withdrawal was occurring at depth. So it was kind of bursty with its activity. and that you had a collapse and it's kind of repressurization, a little bit of magma, and then further collapse, but all the while, the big movement of magma was occurring at depth. So imagine you're living here, okay? You start to feel earthquakes. A few days later, a huge magnitude 6.9 pops off. Everything is shaking. And then just not that long afterwards, you get a huge rift to open up. And I can show you that rift here. This will be the 18th of May, I believe. And this really just goes to show you just how devastating this was for everybody. So you can look at this right here. Here is an aerial footage of that rift, 2018. The rift eruption, the East Rift eruption, cutting through Leilani Estates, all right? That started on the 3rd. So actually one day before that earthquake. But the earthquake really drove it home, right? Because this was a long-term eruption. This wasn't just 2 days. There were lava fountains 300 feet tall. Right now they're about 600 feet. Again, if we go back to our Kilauea feet here, this is about 500-600 feet. So they're about half the size, but along a huge fissure. Obviously lava's flowing out, and there were gas emissions. There was a lot happening. You did have a magnitude 5.0 earthquake that struck before the rift eruption. So let me clear up the timeline. Microseismicity, then a magnitude 5, then the rift eruption. A day later, magnitude 6.9. This thing keeps going as then Kilauea caldera collapses. It starts to fill back up. 2019, 2020, some other events. And there's been an earthquake swarm that has been now active, illustrating everything that's happening in Hawaii. This is really quite interesting. So if we go to our latest earthquakes, just FYI, by the way, our strongest earthquake going back to April 20th struck today 6.2 Indonesia, as we have a large coronal hole right in the Earth-centered geoeffective position. But if we zone in on Hawaii, let's switch this to our 30 days, all magnitudes, United States, and we will very clearly see our earthquake swarm area. So you have Pahala here. See that? Pahala. This is where there's an ongoing earthquake swarm. And what's been identified is that there is a sill complex. You have these horizontal magma chambers effectively that exist. They're about 300 meters tall at their greatest extent, separated by 50 meters, 800 meters, right? There's some distance in between them with less fractured rock. And they can extend out, like overall the lateral extent is like 15 kilometers. You notice that this Pahala sill complex, and this is down 40 kilometers, there's actually two main zones, an upper zone and a lower zone. So the upper body is 36 to 43 kilometers below the surface, and the lower body is 45 to 51 kilometers below surface. This is in the mantle, by the way, the upper mantle. So this is not the crust. This is the mantle. So you have a lot of magma fluid transport that's occurring there. You have these seismic swarms like we're seeing here, but they are migrating through these sills, and what they're finding is that they're actually expanding and fracturing these sills to become larger. I can show you a video of, or a photo rather, of what these sills look like so you can get a better visual understanding. I read through the whole paper so I can kind of visualize it, but this graphic that they put in the paper really neatly summarizes it, I feel like. So let me show you this. Right here. So here's the graphic, and you see that we have these sills are dipping about 24 degrees to the west. And here we see Kilauea, we see the magma chambers, and you see this east rift zone right there kind of extending out. You see Mauna Loa, its magma chamber. And VT means volcano-tectonic, whereas LP means long period. So the long period earthquakes, these waveforms are really long period. That's related to the movement of magma for the most part. I mean, there's, a lot of this is, some of this is, we expect, we speculate, right? But actually we know Hawaii pretty well. But we also don't. And then volcano-tectonic is just more of a normal earthquake, right? Rather than these special long wavelength earthquakes. but we see that there are these connections that exist between them. See here we have the volcanotectonic fracturing here, this fault zone in the mantle, and then as you go up, you start to have these more magma-driven earthquakes in the calderas, but we know that we get these injections that occur, and the overall source of this is even deeper down, so it's the mantle. So this is actually really now a leading model of what a lot of volcanoes may have, especially like undersea volcanoes. They very well could have very similar magma complexes like this. This is the Pahala Sill complex. We've been able to very clearly identify it, you could say, because of all these earthquakes that have occurred, and by using that record of earthquakes, which is, I think it's like thousands. It's thousands and thousands of earthquakes. I'm not sure I wrote the number down. It's highlighted somewhere on here. I mean, I think it's like 192,000 events over a 3.5-year period. Wow, okay? So, and this paper is written in 2022. I'll link both of these in the research description once the live stream's over. So we are seeing repeat swarm episodes under Pahala. We're seeing 47 eruptions now at Kilauea. A few years ago, we had this devastating East Rift eruption here, 700 homes destroyed, magnitude 6.9 a day after it started. Back in 1975, there was a magnitude 7.7. The entire south slope here shifted down. And you just look at these giant cracks that exist too. So you're having large scale movements as well of the crust that's being generated by this hotspot. This volcano is really driving some big systems. The magnitude 7.7 is nearly a megaquake, which is magnitude 8. I mean, guys, that is huge. So we have a lot happening. And if you look at the record, the last comparable tsunami, so remember my friend Elliot, or Eliyahu, call me Eliyahu, he was down here swimming around, right? And there's a little island there that you could swim to. He's down there at the beach. They say that the last comparable tsunami that occurred to what he lived through, he was swept away, we'll read the story, in 1975 was back in 1868. That's nearly a 100-year reoccurrence interval. It's actually 107 years. So shows that that was a big event, right? Then we get this 6.9 in 2018. It's not as comparable to a 7.7, one magnitude less, but still a big event. And we see how there's this connection between volcanic activity, earthquake activity. The earthquakes are really just part of the volcanic system here. That's the bigger thing. But you don't get a tsunami because just it came in from elsewhere. It's because this whole thing pushed out into the sea while also moving down. So the sea was temporarily pushed back, but now because the overall surface level is lower than sea level, it rushed back in. That's what happened. So we'll read his story. So the key is that right now we're having these fairly normal eruptions, and we can put back on our west view, see what this looks like up to date right here. Here's episode 47 again. Let me really shift that over for you guys. Looks pretty nice. So that's what's happening right now, and we're going to get more of these, episode 48, 49, 50. I mean, at some point it's going to die out, but that's the thing. Right now we're kind of in this zone where things are normal and not necessarily destructive. There's like a good pressure outlet for this, but when things change, then maybe they don't change in a good way. It's good to be really on top of this, because what the researchers have found is that these magma sills, these sill complexes and the conduits and everything allow for a rapid transport of magma. So you can have magma here at Kilauea and then it can very quickly move somewhere else. And you also have Mauna Loa and Kilauea connected via this sill complex because of the Pahala earthquake swarm. So it's in this intermediate zone between the two. Again, if you just simply look at it on Google Maps here, there's Kilauea, Pahala earthquake swarm, right? Here's our big guy right here. So this is all connected together. Even over here, our volcano Mauna Kea here, where they have the observatories. There's a little bit of a sleepier magma chamber there, you can call it. It's not as, it's deeper and it's kind of gone stuck, according to the researchers. But you have a lot of activity that exists. It can bounce over here. There's other places it can just spontaneously erupt out of because this magma is very, very fluid. It's very high viscosity, or was it? It's not that, it's not sticky. So it's not like honey. It's like water. It's a very low viscosity. I think that's right. Yeah, low viscosity. So it can move around really, really quickly. So right now everything is like kind of nice because it is erupting at Kilauea fairly regularly in a way that you can forecast, but that may not be the case forever. Here we are. So I think that's really it for the report. I mean, there's more I could say. I have my notes here, but in general, that's kind of where we are right now in 2026. We had the big magnitude 7.7 in 1975, big magnitude 6.9, 2018, East Rift eruption, other things, but this is what we got going right now. Okay, so let us do story time. And yeah, we did a more zoomed out report today because there's really not much to report on in terms of episode 47. Lava fountains are good height, not super crazy. In general, everything's looking pretty normal, which is great. And I just want to get this message here for everybody so they can see it while we do story time. Story time. So get comfortable. We are going to read chapter 6 of Call Me Eliyahu. And I got his permission to do this. I asked Elliot and he's like, yeah, go ahead. Thank you for the honor. So if you want to pick up his book, if you like this chapter, let's say I put a link to the Amazon page for it. I don't get a commission or anything for that. It's just helping a friend out. And I'm so excited to read this book. I've known about it for a while, but he's been editing it and everything. So, okay. Call Me Eliyahu. Boom. Chapter 6. Tsunami. Grab a coconut tree. In Hawaii, I had the opportunity to test out my inner peace and found that I was easily trumped by the very natural, visceral, all-consuming fear of bodily annihilation during a catastrophic natural disaster. From that fear, I quickly learned lessons that might never have been available to me had I not gone to the depths of terror in a moment of overwhelming despair. Yeah, so just a little bit of a content warning here. Some of you are more sensitive than others. So, I mean, I can read this and I don't necessarily get immediately transported into it in like my mind's eye and all of a sudden it's terrifying for me. But he's repeated this story to others in person and he said that it can be kind of intense. So if you're someone that really connects very easily into things, it may be not the thing that you want to connect into now, but you know, it's a very interesting story. Okay. To move this story from India to Hawaii, let me do a little space-time orientation. After experience of a quiet mind in Bodh Gaya, I lost interest, but only 100% in continuing my travels. And where was there to go but home? And in my case, that meant a room in my parents' house in Queens of New York City. I arrived home just before the lighting of the candles on the first night of Hanukkah in December. I guess Hanukkah, there's a C there. Hanukkah in December of 1973. I stayed in New York for over 3 months, meditating for about 4 hours every day. Even though I was more peaceful than ever before, this was upsetting to my mother, who wanted me to be more ambitious in getting on with a career and to make the beginning on the path of eventually giving her grandchildren. Eliyahu's never done it. One morning, I was peacefully meditating when my mother came into my bedroom and loudly shouted, "You are nothing but a zombie. All you do every day is stare at your pupik." The word pupik is Yiddish for belly button and rhymes with look it. Look it, puk it. So I guess it's puk it. As I just continued to meditate with closed eyes and did not move, she screamed, "You are nothing but a vegetable," and slammed the door. Although I felt hurt, I could empathize with my mother's frustration. Felt like singing her my own rendition of the lines from Bob Dylan's song, "It's Alright Ma, I'm Only Bleeding." Although the masters make the rules for the wise man and the fools, I got nothing, Ma, I'm only meditating. I eventually realized that New York City was no longer my home. I spent the last years in the tropical climates of Africa, Asia, and this was a particularly cold winter in New York City. Once I left New York City, I traveled for many months visiting friends in New Mexico, Arizona, California, Oregon, Washington, and in November of 1974, I boarded a plane with a one-way ticket to Hilo on the big island of Hawaii. I'd never been to Hawaii, but I had heard that the air and water of Hawaii were the purest in the United States, and I was looking for an island where I could feel both warm and safe. Good luck in Hawaii, and I was in luck. Who should I coincidentally meet at the airport of Hilo but a friend who had meditated with me in Bodh Gaya, who had the new name Yongdu in India. He had called himself Ward Holmes. Yongdu told me that he was part of a Tibetan Buddhist group that was transforming an old abandoned Japanese temple into a Tibetan temple in an area called Wood Valley near the town of Pahala, where that Pahala Sill complex and the earthquake swarm is nowadays, in the southern part of the Big Island. Like a true Dharma buddy, he said that if I was willing to help in that transformation, I could get free room and board for the next few months. And I did labor diligently for those 3 months. Mostly I assisted in painting the wooden boards of the abandoned Japanese temple with the color scheme of Tibetan Buddhist temples, red, yellow, and green. Kalu Rinpoche arrived in early February with 3 other Tibetan monks and an excellent Western translator. Kalu was 70 years old and looked tranquil and wise. With Kalu present, I took refuge in what are called the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. From what Kalu said, I gathered that the highest good of Buddhism was Bodhi, which could be translated as enlightenment or waking up. By taking refuge, I was dedicating my life to finding a path, the Dharma, to wake up by aligning myself with the community of people, the Sangha, similarly inclined to such an awakening. I thought of the 3 jewels as a tree where the Buddha is the roots, the Dharma the trunk, and the Sangha the leaves. Camping out in an idyllic spot called Halape. Eventually I made my home in Hilo. I lived in voluntary simplicity and worked as a substitute teacher in the public schools of Hilo. Loving the outdoors, I made a whole new set of friends who were interested in exploring the beaches and hills of the Big Island. One of my favorite places was called Halape, which is the Hawaiian word for that which is lost or missing. Halape is a campground in Volcanoes National Park right on the ocean beneath a 1,000-foot, 300-meter cliff called Pu'u Kapu Kapu, Hawaiian for Forbidden Hill. There was no road for a motorized vehicle to get to Halape over miles of black lava because Halape could only be reached on foot or on horseback, remain unadulterated by civilization. The first time I visited the campground at Halape, I found it to be idyllic. The temperature was always mild. The Park Service had built shelters where rain that ran off the shelter roofs was stored in adjacent catchment tanks to give campers an abundant supply of rainwater. The shelter was in a coconut grove. As I become skillful in wielding a machete to split open coconuts, I could have at least one delicious coconut each morning. I could swim out to a tiny island in the ocean called Kilauea. I hope I'm saying that right. Kilauea, Hawaiian for sharp islet. And studying the letters in the name, Keaoi, I figured this might be the only time I could visit an island whose name contained each of the 4 vowels of the English language. It's interesting. He's very smart. He's a very smart guy. On the way to the island was a serene lagoon where I could put my face snorkel on and see the endless profusion of colorful fish, even turtles, that were everywhere near the shoreline of Hawaii. Knowing that it was good to balance my diet, I brought an ample supply of vegetables and brown rice, and when others arrived, we shared food and stories and lively camaraderie. In one night, 2 earthquakes. So here we're going. We're getting to the story. I wanted to read the full chapter for you guys. Maybe the beginning wasn't necessary, but get you centered in the life of Eliyahu at this time. He's probably about my age or younger. He's probably actually younger than me right now at this point in the book. I would have to, probably right in that zone. In one night, 2 earthquakes. My second visit to Jalapa was on Thursday weekend of 1975. Was on the Thanksgiving weekend of 1975. Again, the magnitude 7.7 was November 29th, 1975. So we have one of the best field reports in history for that earthquake because of Eliyahu here. Because he got swept up in the tsunami, okay? A lot of people in Hilo, obviously it was destructive. It was, bad news. But he was literally swept away in the tsunami because he's right on the ocean south of Kilauea where the slope collapse occurred. This time my hike was sponsored by the local chapter of the Sierra Club, and I went with a group of 8. Along the Puna Coast Trail from Kalapana, the 8-mile hike was along a path that was well marked and well maintained. Since we were walking over a giant lava field that was windy and hot, and let me show you it really quick. Because we can make this interactive, baby. So let's get back to our display capture. So he's walking basically through this lava field, okay? Since we were walking over a giant lava field that was windy and hot, I felt that I had arrived at an oasis when I saw Jalapa with its sturdy shelters next to water tanks amidst a coconut grove and right next to the ocean. Many people had already arrived. There was a troop of 6 Boy Scouts with 4 leaders, 2 sets of couples, and also 9 fishermen who brought down 9 horses. This, again, specifically is a little island right here that you could swim out to. And this sank even more as the event occurred. So the whole thing sank down. So that's the setting for this right here. We had hiked in on the Thursday of the Thanksgiving holiday, and after a relaxing Friday, an earthquake woke us all up at 3:35 a.m. on the Saturday morning. It was just a single jolt, and it startled us, but since all seemed peaceful, we each drifted back to sleep. Then there was a much stronger earthquake at 4:48 a.m. Unlike the first one, the shaking did not subside, and it continued on and on and on for at least 30 seconds. This is what the USGS has categorized as a magnitude 7.7. In the book, he has it as a magnitude 7.2 because that was the initial categorization it came out with pretty quickly, and so that's probably what's in his mind. But they've revised it upwards to a magnitude 7.7. Although I was in my sleeping bag, the trembling ground was heaving and jerking my whole body about in a rhythmic motion. Little did I know that I was soon to experience the single most intense moment of my life. While the earthquake was still happening, I heard a loud, deafening, thunderous roar. It seemed the entire cliff right behind us, called Pu'u Kapu Kapu, was landsliding. As soon as the ground stopped shaking, I jumped out of my sleeping bag to stand up and began shouting as loud as I could, "Landslide! Landslide!" I feared that boulders might be bounding through the coconut grove. As the sound of the landslide began to subside, I could hear a different sound coming from the opposite direction. A rumble from the ocean. Even though it was still dark, a waning crescent moon over the water permitted me to see. All I could make out was that the water level of the Pacific Ocean was much lower. I said to myself, the Pacific Ocean is disappearing. Where could it be going? But then, far in the distance, I saw a high swell coming steadily towards the shore. Knowing that this meant trouble, I asked myself, do I have a right to refuse this experience? The only experience worse than being caught in a tsunami is seeing an enormous wave rushing towards you and realizing that there's absolutely nothing you can do to escape your fate. I felt terror rise from deep in the pit of my stomach. I knew that I was directly in the path of an unstoppable tidal wave. A tsunami comes to Jalape. My Sierra Club companion let out a blood-curdling shriek, "Tsunami! Grab a coconut tree!" Although there were coconut trees everywhere, I tried to grab the trunk of the coconut tree that my friend was holding onto, and I accidentally grabbed the trunk of his body along with the trunk of the coconut tree. Within a second, warm ocean water rushed in gently up to our waist. I watched my tent and my sleeping bag disappear, but I felt in some way that this was rather neat. I thought, someday I know this will make a great story. Then the water surged out of the ocean with an unimaginable power. The pressure so strong that it felt like the force of many fire hoses right up against my body. As I was facing the ocean, my neck was being pushed back landwards. I yelled, "I can't hold on, I can't hold on," and the next moment I noticed the water was above my head and I went unconscious. Still to this day, I do not grasp why I would go unconscious. There was no pain in my body. All I can guess is that the astronomical level of biological fear inside my mind was the precondition for the blackout. When I regained consciousness, I was instantaneously wide awake and I experienced myself in a time warp, a bit like a later day Rip Van Winkle, who after being asleep for 20 years might wonder what this strange new environment in which he now found himself was. I can recall that ages ago I had been holding on to a coconut tree when the water had risen higher than my head and I could not hold on. But now what I saw was that the coconut grove was rapidly receding in the distance, being taken inland by a swift current. I said to myself, yes, this is indeed a tsunami. This really is not too bad. The water is warm, and since I'm a decent swimmer, all I have to do is find a way to make sure I'm not taken back out to sea. And when this wave eventually recedes. As I said this to myself, I was dragged down by the downward spiraling vortex of a whirlpool. I used all my might to struggle to rise to the surface. However, I was being both whirled and twirled around as if I was at the bottom of a drain being swirled into oblivion. Once I could not hold my breath any longer, I noticed that as I continued to breathe, what was being drawn into my lungs was not air but water. As I was involuntarily gulping in more and more water, I had the chilling realization that I had lost control of the situation. I knew that this might be the day of my death, and I thought of the exact words that Joseph Goldstein had said in Bodh Gaya 2 years before: "Do not get attached to your body, you will have to leave it someday." To my amazement, this thought produced not even a single mini instant of calm or tranquility. In fact, it seemed totally useless in bringing me any peace of mind. A biological mechanism had kicked in and all of me, all 100%, wanted not to be drowned. Words fail me as I try to describe the immeasurable levels of panic that began in the pit of my stomach and moved on to engulf my entire body. Now I was only breathing water, but it felt like I was being thrashed around inside a washing machine. My mood changed from panic to despair. In this despair, I just assumed that this was the end of my life's journey. I mentally gave up the ghost. Even though I gave up on my struggle for survival, my mind remained frozen in fear. My body could not resist taking an occasional breath, sucking more and more ocean water into my lungs. Then my mood turned even darker. I was experiencing pure terror. I had never felt such an intense feeling. All the panics that had been previously known were like mere molehills next to this towering monolithic mountain of striped and naked terror. Now, nothing remained but an unadulterated fear, visceral and amazingly primal and pure. My mind no longer contained thoughts, time disappeared, but consciousness abided as I witnessed the intense horror of suffocation. I could not stop breathing, and with each breath, drawing more water into my lungs, my insides exploded. And then I found myself tumbling over a waterfall. Later, I realized that the tsunami had taken me into a crevasse, a deep open crack in the lava that had been created by previous earthquakes. It was about 15 feet, 4.5 meters deep, and 30 feet or 9 meters across. No longer being propelled landward by the tidal wave, I coughed out the salt water in my throat. I looked around the crevasse in the pale moonlight and began shouting the same words I had shouted right after the earthquake before I went unconscious. Landslide, landslide. I was on a big boulder. Without seeing where I was going, I took a step in the dark and fell down several feet and landed on my left knee, causing a sharp pain. And now that I was at the very bottom of the crevasse, I was again in water, but this time the water is only knee deep. I could see where I had previously been on top of a large boulder that was above the water line. As I could see a waterfall pouring into the crevasse, I crawled back up upon the same boulder, and from there I could reach the ocean side of the crevasse. As the water continued to pour down over my head, I climbed up under the waterfall and found that while grabbing a protruding rock tightly with each hand, I could press my mouth near to the side of the crevasse and take a deep breath. I consciously took in a very, very, very deep breath. Even though I had been breathing for a full minute, now for the first time I became aware that I really was breathing. That first really deep conscious breath was the most ecstatic breath of my life, and the thought simultaneously rose that I might actually survive to tell this tale. As the stream of water that continued to fall upon my head lessened to a mere trickle, I climbed up the inside of the crevasse to peep out at the landscape. I could see the water was drawing back to the ocean. There was a dead horse right in front of me and myriads of fish still flapping about on the land. In the distance, the trunks of the trees of the coconut groves were submerged under water, and all I could see were coconut fronds. And then, from right below me, I heard a cry that was less than human. The sound was at the same time both a wail and a moan. I looked at my watch and its hands had stopped at 49 minutes. After 1 minute after the record books say that the second earthquake had come to Kilauea at 4:48 a.m. Again, the magnitude 8.8 quake that struck Hawaii. The biggest event on record as far as I know, but 1868 could be maybe comparable. We have some data for that. Tsunami similar to what we just, what Eliyahu here just recounted his experience of occurred in 1868 just nearby. Am I alive? Still in the dark, I came down from the crevasse and approached the sound that was wailing and moaning. I should mention that I was both naked and shivering. I was naked because I like to sleep in the nude in my sleeping bag, and I was shivering not because it was cold, but because my body was in shock. A voice came from the whale, and the voice asked me a question. Am I alive? But the question was more like a wail and moan than a regular question. It sounded like, alive? To be honest, I had the thought from the moment that I took my first breath that there was a possibility I could have drowned, and I was just imagining I was still alive. I was naked, shivering, my watch had stopped, my glasses were gone, and everywhere there were shadows in the spooky dark of the first light of dawn. Might these not all be signs that I was actually now a dead being in the underworld? I wonder how I could prove to myself that I was really in the land of living. I asked myself, is it not possible that I might now be dead? I did not want to answer the question from the moaning man while trying to be fully in my integrity and confess, to tell you the truth, I do not know whether either of us is still alive. As the day dawned and the world lit up, I could see for the first time the man who was in the crevasse with me. He was lying on his back and still moaning. Eventually the moan stopped, and when he sat up, he complained to me that he should not have almost drowned because, according to the guidebooks, he had done all the right things. The moment after the second earthquake, being a white native of Hawaii and a fisherman, he knew that a tsunami was in the offing after such a big earthquake. He had immediately started running and had gone to the edge of the crevasse about the length of 3 football fields or 250 meters from the ocean when the tsunami hit. Hit him from the rear, threw him into the still empty crevasse, and he had been drowning as all the water filled up the crevasse. But his life had been saved when the water emptied out of the crevasse's southern opening into the ocean. Talking to him, I realized that by staying so close to the ocean after such a big earthquake, I had done the wrong thing. But the guidebook, the wrong response according to the guidebook. Of course, the guidebook could not have known about a crevasse that would prevent any escape. In my case, my ignorance prevented greater harm. If I had still been holding onto the coconut tree while the crevasse had been filling up with water. Both of the people who died in this tidal wave had done what the authorities said was the right action in running away from the ocean the very moment the earth had stopped quaking. I realized how lucky I was. The coconut trees were arranged like bowling pins behind me, and I was the bowling ball being thrown landward at an unbelievably fast speed. Even a slow tsunami goes about 200 miles per hour. If my body had struck any of these bowling pins, the coconut trees, I would have indeed been a strike. Like, strike, you're out. I spent an hour with the fishermen, and then the Boy Scouts descended upon us. They told us that they had found the body of their scoutmaster, Dr. James Mitchell, may he rest in peace, under a big boulder not far from me in the crevasse. Each Boy Scout had his own story, and none of them had been badly hurt. My favorite story was of the Boy Scout who had scrambled to the top of his shelter after the earthquake, and once the tsunami hit, the shelter had been completely obliterated, but the aluminum top of the shelter became his surfboard. And he said he was riding on top of the tsunami wave and had the most exciting surfing ride of his life. One of the Boy Scouts saw that I was still shivering, so he guided me out of the crevasse towards the ocean and left me sitting naked on a big rock in the hot sun while he went to try to find Michael Cruz, a missing fisherman. Michael had last been seen running away from the ocean before the big wave arrived, and never has he been found. I sat there in the hot sun and thought of all the events of the day. I was surrounded by dead fish that looked quite beautiful in their multicolored luminescent skins. I could also see a dead horse not far away and several other horses that had been killed because they had been tied to coconut trees. They were just floating in the ocean next to their respective coconut trees with what had become nooses around their necks. Because again, everything sank down. So that coconut grove, which was before above sea level, was now under sea level. I pondered that if the ropes tying the horses to the trees were lassos or lariats designed to tighten under strains, the horses might have lost consciousness from the severing of their spinal cords once their necks broke, long before they even had a chance to drown. There were odd pieces of clothing and some shreds of tents and sleeping bags. I saw that the islet called Kilauea was much lower, and now it only had its highest rock above the Pacific Ocean, which is what we would see today. I'm not sure it's lowered since then further, but it's still above the surface of the ocean now. I decided to go inward, so I just closed my eyes, I put my knees up to my chest, and to my amazement, I started laughing hysterically, with the sound of a madman. This laugh was neither joyful nor a response to anything that was funny, but 100% a mechanical release of tension that had been stored in my body while drowning. And the laugh is imitated in the book, but I will spare you the, it's like a ha, ho, 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 ha. This went on with lessening intensity for around an hour. Even though the day was quickly warming up and my unclothed body was fully exposed to the sun in a cloudless sky, my body continued to shiver. Never before in Hawaii had I shivered when doing nude sunbathing. I began to wonder if anyone even knew there were campers who needed to be rescued down here at Jalape. I figured that if no one came today, I would have to sleep in the nude that night with neither sleeping bag nor tent. I devised a plan where the survivors would eventually send a few healthy Boy Scouts back to civilization to find rescuers. I still had the knee injury from the moment I had fallen inside the crevasse. There was no blood or visible wound, but the knee continued to swell, and I knew I was in no shape to take an 8-mile hike. Now we have a couple sections here about the rescue, and I just want to make sure there's nothing in here that isn't, I don't think any of the actual, well, it is quite long. Let me see how much more we have, because I do want to get to the main info that he also shares. But yeah, so we'll move on. I recommend you maybe pick up the book if you've been enjoying this thus far. I haven't read the other chapters, but I love this guy. He's great. Okay. So he had nightmares after this. And although he was to live in Hawaii, Eliyahu was to live in Hawaii for 2.5 more years, in many ways this experience terminated his stay there. He can never again sleep near the ocean without at least having a mini nightmare. And I still believe that Hawaii is both the purest air and water in America, but now I felt in the cells of my body a tear that was equally unadulterated and pure. What the books say about this tsunami. I now want to conclude and tell about the events that happened in the early morning of Saturday, November 29th, 1975, with the gift of hindsight. All the Boy Scouts survived, but their leader, Dr. James Mitchell, had been crushed under a boulder in the crevasse. Michael Cruz had been washed out to sea, and the search for him had been called off in a few days. The fisherman who was in the crevasse with me never recovered his full breathing capacity, as half a pound of sand was discovered in the alveoli, the tiny air sacs of his lungs. And lung specialists declared that there was no way to remove this sand. He had been swallowing sandy seawater for around a minute before the water had left the crevasse. Both the earthquake and the tsunami were caused by a sudden movement of the seafloor off the southeast coast of Hawaii. Let's pull up the map that we have specifically for this, provided by the USGS. Here it is. This is the intensity map. And again, you see Kilauea caldera right here. This is where he was. Right down here with his beach, and you see the epicenter was just off to the east, but the area of greatest intensity and shaking was here, where you have this immense sill complex. Again, remember the Pahala earthquake swarm. This is a new feature, by the way. We've seen other periods of seismicity and similar microseismicity to Pahala, and the earthquake records are older, so it's kind of apples to oranges. We can't directly compare them 100%, but this magma complex that is underneath Pahala that connects these volcanoes together is actively growing right now. So the hotspot is actively growing with its magma network underneath. And there's more magma continuously coming up from the deep mantle and injecting into the system. And under scenarios like this, you can get events like this to unfold. So this is not the first magnitude 7+ earthquake to hit Hawaii. It's not going to be the last. It's not the first tsunami. It's not going to be the last. It's not the first big eruption. You know, Kilauea was erupting as this occurred too. There was a mini eruption that hit Kilauea at the same time as this earthquake. I think he addresses that in here. So both the earthquake and the tsunami were caused by a sudden movement of the seafloor off the southeast coast of Hawaii. According to seismic instruments, the first earthquake had a magnitude of 5.7 on the Richter scale, and the second was a 7.2. USGS new revision, 7.7. While the tsunami was coming into Jalape, red-hot lava had begun to fountain 30 feet 10 meters high along a fissure on the floor of the Kilauea caldera. Now, if we just go back here, this right here is about 600 feet tall. So think a lot, not as tall as this, okay? It's a lot shorter, but still there was some fountaining that occurred in Kilauea caldera, showing that there was a little bit of magma there. This movement then kind of pressurized and squeezed it out of the system. Because the resulting lava flow came so early in the morning, no tourists had been injured. Young active volcanoes expand horizontally as they rise vertically, thereby becoming unstable as chunks of land can break off the slopes and slide onto the seafloor. And well, look at those giant cracks, folks, right? They exist. Jalapa fell 12 feet or 3.5 meters as it slumped seaward during the earthquake, and the Big Island gained a few acres as the south flank of Kilauea moved into the ocean. The spot where I had been camping 6 feet above sea level had fallen the full 12 feet. So once the land had stopped shaking, my sleeping bag was now 6 feet below sea level. During the moment that I was screaming landslide, landslide, because the land has already descended downwards into the ocean, I was actually at a lower elevation than the entire Pacific Ocean. As the slope of the volcano had broken off, the ocean had been pushed back about 1 mile, 1.5 kilometers. And one could make up a story to personify what happened next. The ocean did not like being pushed around by a mere chunk of earth that showed no respect for its clearly demarcated boundary, and being in a foul mood, came back with an unforgiving vengeance. The coconut trees had lost all their fronds up to the point of 20 feet or 6 meters. So this is the figure given for the height of the wave, the tsunami. After the land subsided, all the roots of these palm trees were below sea level, so it was just a matter of time until the salt water would kill all these trees. A tsunami is defined as a wave created in a large body of water by a sudden disturbance. Such a wave-like swell can be caused by an earthquake, a landslide, volcanic eruption, or even a meteorite impact. The word tsunami comes from the Japanese word su, which is harbor, and nami, which is wave. The highest tsunami ever recorded was in the Litua Bay in Alaska, where a rock landslide created a wave that was 1,720 feet tall, or 524 meters, the height of a 145-story building. Oh, imagine that thing coming at you. Ooh, I think people survived that too, or if I remember right, I know there's some story of a massive tsunami in Alaska, and the boat actually somehow got over like the wave that was 500 feet tall. Maybe it's this one. I know that, I remember that clearly. Someone can look it up and post in the comments. Okay. What I went through now is what is called by the history books the Kalapana earthquake of 1975. Although the swells coming towards Hawaii from earthquakes in Alaska are both higher and more destructive, this Kalapana earthquake has a reputation in those history books of having created the most destructive locally generated tsunami in Hawaii during the 20th century and so far into the 21st century. The last comparable locally generated tsunami anywhere in Hawaii occurred not far from Jalapa in 1868, and this was similarly caused by a seaward traveling landmass pushing back the ocean after an earthquake. So probably a comparable event showing that there's a reoccurrence interval, at least for those two, of about 100 years. And I'll read his final closing thoughts. Because this is relevant to the channel and what we talk about. Lessons learned in a camping spot called Jalapa. This Thanksgiving camping trip that was so interrupted by a big wave now happened 50 years ago. I look upon these events as a great teaching. Being terrified in the face of death showed me that I had lied to myself about my level of spiritual evolution. I see denial as a form of lying. Don't even notice I am lying. D-E-N-I-A-L, denial. Don't even notice I am lying. I realized that before the tsunami, I had not known myself well enough to perceive how truly attached I was to this particular body. Ever since Bodh Gaya, I've been telling people that I had no fear of death. I thought that I figured out that in essence, who I am is conscious. So what did it really matter when I left my body? I also told myself that according to the laws of karma, I would just get a new body and be reborn anyways. In my mind, there was the thought that it did not matter when I died. Yes, how little I knew before that day. Although I definitely would never want to relive this experience, I am still deeply grateful that I gained a lesson in humility. A new way of holding reality became an axiom of my emotional landscape. What died in the dawn's early light of that Hawaiian morning was the belief that I would one day somehow find a secure resting place in the world. This insight resonates with this teaching found in the Bible. Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. Luke 9:54. I do have a playful way of expressing this insight when on the rare occasion I feel moved to tell my story of the earthquake that spawned a tsunami. I only do this when my audience is logged out of the electronic noise and emotional static of our media age and there are no people coming and going. I found that the telling often elicits an emotional response from those who hear it. I guess that they feel a dose of that terror that I experienced when such a big wave forever changed my sense of security. If you are ever to hear me tell this story in person, you will find me concluding this tale by saying the word tsunami in a rather peculiar way. I will mispronounce the word as if it were tsunomi. I will tell you how this me got really terrified when he feared that he might leave his body and become a no-me. And that is the majority of chapter 6 of Call Me Eliyahu. Autobiography from my good friend, Elliot. We have incredible, anytime we hang out, the three of us, we have one other friend too. Shout out to Bettina. Anytime we hang out, the whole world, like reality matrix, just goes completely haywire. We're able to go anywhere, do anything. It's wild. It's fantastic. So happy to see that his book is out. It's available. If you did like that, you know, you can pick it up and read it. I'm excited to go through it, but I know the guy, so no obligation. Just wanted to share that with you because that is a very vivid firsthand account of that magnitude 7.7 earthquake that struck November 29th, 1975. And we're seeing 47 eruptive episodes of activity at Kilauea. That does not mean that we need to be worried imminently for tomorrow or next week, but I will be tracking this like a hawk because I love Hawaii first and foremost. And it's fascinating. It's a glimpse into some of the premier volcanism on our planet. It's the world's largest hotspot. It's actively growing right now. Where we can really track that evolution across time. But someone, and there's obviously many amazing researchers and scientists with the USGS and other organizations tracking the activity at Hawaii, but we need all hands on deck because it can be really destructive. And that shows you, just that first-hand account really shows you what it can be like. So, the end of story time there. End of story time there. And I don't believe there's anything else to cover. We have one other thing I can mention, and that is the fact that we are right now in the midst of a Mercury cazimi. So this is a superior conjunction of Mercury, the planet, on the other side of the sun. It's, and actually, yeah, you're going to see at the very beginning, just a little point of light right here. See that right there? That's Mercury. It's now conjunct the sun. So you have Mercury exactly behind the sun right now in line with Earth. And in fact, on the other side of Mercury, we have the dwarf planet Ceres. So we are in the midst of that right now, which is pretty cool. This is a significant planetary alignment. We do have a geomagnetic storm that is expected. If we go here to our 3-day forecast, let's see the times for this. We have May 15th. Actually, they have their forecast coming up in just hours. A G2 storm will come in from a high-speed stream impact, a coronal hole high-speed stream impact. I can show you that as well. We have our solar data here. Let me pull this up for you all. This coronal hole. And here is the coronal hole right here. So the high-speed stream will be impacting us. NOAA is expecting a G1 to G2 storm. That's my expectation as well. Fountaining at Hawaii is occurring right now in the midst of this Kazemi as the storm's about to come in. And we're probably about 1/3 the way through. The live stream's been going on for 2 hours and 55 minutes. And if we look at our tilt data, we see that we are about 1/3 of the way through. Unless this really deflates below the past two. We see our past month here. And you notice that we've slightly inflated higher than the prior two. And also we did not extend as deeply down with episode 46 as 45. So we could, I mean, you see the trend, how all of them are coiling up. So I mean, it is possible that this really goes down, but it's more likely that we stay in this range. And that means we're about 1/3 of the way through. It's probably going to be about 8 to 9 hours of lava fountaining from Kilauea. Let's give Kilauea a look again, and then I'm going to sign off. I'm going to keep the live stream going. So let's get this one up to date and live. See what it looks like. Ooh, there we go. That's a nice show. Boom shakalaka. Great. So that is your update today for Hawaii, Kilauea. Episode 47 is going, probably about another 6 hours. I've been your host, Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy. Your Cosmic Bro, here to help you understand what is happening on the planet. I do think I'm still going to be here, but what I will do is I'll turn off the camera, and I have a singing bowl here. I'm just going to play the singing bowl for a little bit. So, but I had to check my phone first to see if there's nothing I need to attend to. So with that, thank you all. Have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next video. The sun is setting in Hawaii, and now I will play just a little bit of a crystal singing bowl for you all. So just find a comfortable position, rest and relax, and let's begin. Mother Earth, Gaia, our home, Goddess Pele, Haumea, the Creator Goddess. We give our thanks to all those who support us, who nurture us, who care for us on this planet. And we also give our respect to these wild, raw, powerful forces of nature. Thank you all so much. I'll see you all very soon in another video. Again, reminder that we have an in-person event in San Diego in just 2 days. If you're watching this, you want to make it, tickets are still available. Check the video description. There's also a sale going on till the 16th of Saturday for the Earth Evolution web store in general, using the code community26, all one word, for 5% off. Thank you all. Have a great day. Much love, mahalo, and aloha.